This is Law Bytes, a podcast with Michael Geist.
Massive security breach at Capital One Financial. A hacker with the online handle Erratic is now in police custody after she accessed the personal information of more than 100 million people, 6 million of them Canadian. This is just the latest in a series of troubling data breaches. In 2017, about 150 million Equifax customers had their credit card and social insurance numbers stolen, including thousands of Canadians. Last summer, 20,000 Air Canada customers were affected when the airline's mobile app was breached. And just last month, 2.7 million Desjardins customers learned their data, including social insurance numbers, had been hacked.
Privacy breaches have become increasingly commonplace as businesses of all sizes grapple with how to keep customer information secure and what to do when things go wrong. The issue is particularly challenging for small and medium-sized businesses who are forced to navigate a regulatory framework that isn't easy and can be extremely expensive. Enter JusTech, a project launched by Ritesh Kotak, Ayushi Dave, and Ryan Mossof, 3 University of Ottawa law students who leveraged legal innovation hackathons to create a free online service that walks small businesses through the regulations and makes compliance manageable. I've been proud to serve as an advisor to JusTech, which provides some notable lessons on legal innovation and privacy law. Ritesh, Ayushi, and Ryan join me on the podcast to discuss. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. This is a super exciting project, and I've been very pleased to serve on the advisory board. And we're going to get into the background of the project and sort of what it means for both privacy law as well as legal tech innovation. I think it really is interesting for so many of those reasons. Why don't we start, perhaps, Ryan, if you can introduce the team and give us a bit of background on what prompted you to create the service.
Thank you so much for having us, Professor Geist. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and we're so excited to talk to you about our project today. So my name is Ryan Mossof, and I'm joined by my co-founders, Ritesh Kotak and Ayushi Dave. We're 3 law students in our 3rd year at the University of Ottawa, and we're co-founders of JusTech, which provides legal automation and information for privacy breaches. I'll just make a quick note that I'm also going to be articling at the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, and my work with JusTech isn't related to that employment, and they have no involvement with JusTech either.
So, you sound like a lawyer already.
Practice makes perfect, right?
There you go. Go ahead, Ryan.
How does JusTech, how did we come about with this idea? So as law students, we're connected with some amazing communities at the University of Ottawa. And one of those opportunities that was available to us was a hackathon, which is a week-long competition to solve an access to justice issue. So we signed up for the hackathon, and we ended up focusing on data security breach reporting for small businesses. So why do we choose small businesses? Well, our families are connected by this common thread, the small business. Ritesh grew up in the food industry. His family has a small business that sells different spices, and he actually had his crib in his parents' shop. So he has that connection there. Ayushi's father owns his own sales consultancy in Botswana, and my grandfather started a lumber business when I was very young, and he's successful there. So we've seen the struggles and successes of entrepreneurship, which ended up motivating us to direct our skills and energy towards building solutions. And so with that motivation there, we ended up actually winning the hackathon and continue to build out JusTech till today.
Well, cool. So congratulations on getting through that. I mean, you've got the commonality of the small business side. Tell me a bit about the commonality in terms of how common are data security breaches. You know, how big of an issue is this that's in need of the kind of solution that you've created with JusTech?
I think the issue is a lot more prominent than we think, especially now because businesses have been forced online so suddenly. Just to throw out some statistics, approximately 1 in 4 companies experience a data breach. But the problem is that a lot of businesses don't even know that they've experienced a data breach. During the pandemic, we've seen more and more businesses and institutions have been hit by cyber attacks. I mean, every other week on the news, we see some hospital or some business that has had a ransomware attack. IBM reported that the cost of data breaches has reached an all-time high, with a cost of 4.2 million per incident. We also did some research and found out that the average legal cost to file a breach report with a lawyer in Canada is around $15,000. And that 41% of small businesses stated that the cost to deal with a breach averaged around $100,000, which is a lot of money if you think about it for a small business, especially during COVID, when there's such a huge financial burden on everyone as it is. And in fact, there's also been a 28% increase in reporting since the pandemic started. But we do know that cyber crimes and privacy breaches are severely underreported. And so these numbers may actually be a lot higher.
Okay. So it's clearly a real issue, and a real issue for businesses of all sizes, and can be a heavy lift, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. How complex is the compliance side of this? You talked a bit about the cost. Is this a complicated law to comply with? It's obviously a relatively new requirement in Canada, but how challenging is it to comply with the law?
To comply with the law, there's three things that you have to do. First, you have to go report it to the privacy commissioner. Then you have to notify the affected individuals, and then keep records of all the breaches. So on the face of it, it seems very simple, but the actual process can be very daunting. So you've just gone through a breach. The last thing you want to worry about is whether or not you're complying with the law, and all the technicalities that are associated with reporting the breach. All the information is out there, but to the average person, the language of the form, the requirements that they have to comply with, it might come across as very complicated to understand. And so in that sense, it can be very complex for the average person.
Okay, so it can be complicated. So Ritesh, we've got a real issue and clearly a real challenge for small and medium-sized businesses. Tell me how the service solves this problem.
So the way JusTech tries to solve the problem is we found that currently the system is very reactive. So most businesses don't even think about cybersecurity. They don't think about privacy compliance until they're actually involved knee deep in a breach. And this is where we found all the predatory pricing kicks in. This is where the system starts working against them. And what we wanted to do was really create a starting point for small businesses, a one-stop shop where we can alleviate the stress by them coming to us, filling out a questionnaire, and as a result of their answers, auto-generating, not auto-submitting, but auto-generating the necessary documents that they need based on the laws that Ayushi just spoke about. So what do you actually get as a result of going through our tool? You get a Office of the Privacy Commissioner breach reporting form completed. You get internal notification, client notification. We ended up using the template that was provided by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. You also get an infographic on what are your immediate next steps. How do you actually file these reports? Because as I said, we auto-generate, we don't actually auto-submit. And the reason for that is you can actually go in and change up your answers. Make sure that you can have somebody review it, whether it be a lawyer, privacy professional. We really wanted to give the autonomy, the right back into the hands of small business owners. Other things that it also generates, and the way the tool works, is it'll actually give you some preliminary policies. We found that, again, if we wanted to move businesses from being reactive into proactive, what do they require? The immediacy, but they also require policies to mitigate against future breaches and safeguarding of their data. They will also require information around cybersecurity and privacy. Hence, we actually developed a course which is completely free that users can go through and get basic knowledge about privacy, security, and some of the legislation as well. And the entire tool, I must add, is bilingual.
Okay, so it's bilingual. That sounds like there's a lot there. You guys talked earlier about the large costs that people would typically face if they look to a lawyer to use this. This tool, though, costs how much?
That's a good question. The magic number is 0. It is a free tool, and we were able to make it free and keep it free because because of the way we actually built it. And I think our team, the complementary skill sets on this team, Ryan being an excellent legal researcher and writer, Ayushi being excellent with graphic design, I having a previous background in tech and coding, we were literally able to come together and work with other organizations to develop a product that doesn't matter whether it's used once or a billion times, our costs remain the same. Hence, we were able to offer all these tools and these courses to the public for free.
Okay, no, and that's really awesome. So it's a free service. It solves a real problem. So far, what kind of response have you received?
So the response has been absolutely incredible from the university community, the privacy community, even different levels of government. We actually had the chance to meet with the province's small business and red tape reduction minister as well, because the idea here was supporting small businesses and actually making them that much more competitive. We got to remember, small business owners are human beings, they're individuals, and going through a breach is extremely stressful to them. So how do we alleviate some of that stress? So it generated those types of conversations as well. The other response that we've gotten, I'll take it back to one of our team members. It was from Ryan's grandmother. She's 91 years old, and she actually went through, used the tool, used the course, and she found it to be extremely helpful and learned about privacy and cybersecurity. And our thing was, how do we actually get this to the masses? I think we're able to do that. And another point to mention is we've actually partnered with different community organizations, and one of them actually services the agriculture industry. And we had no idea. There's just in the Ottawa region alone, there's about 1,000 different independent farms. 1,000. So if you take that and you put that to scale across our country, that's a lot of farms, and a lot of these are family owned and operated. And they found that our agriculture sector is very vulnerable to these types of breaches, and really wanted to increase the cyber hygiene of our agriculture sector. So the JusTech course and tools are actually being recommended to them, to the sector as well. So the response has just been absolutely overwhelming.
Oh, it's amazing. Congratulations to see that kind of response. One of the things that really interested me about your project was how you've managed to fund it. I mean, you talked about the low cost in terms of once it's up and running, but one of the things that makes it really interesting is how you entered into this world of legal hacking and innovation competitions. Can you talk a bit about that process and how that encourages some of the kind of innovation that we see here?
Yeah, so as Ritesh mentioned, we've had an amazing response from the university, from the privacy community, and different levels of government. And as you mentioned, we are funded through fellowships at the university and through competitions. And we think that it's the free model that has elicited a great response from some of the charitable organizations or through these competitions. And we think that that's part of the process there. But we also recognize the importance of having funds in order to scale up. We want to move into different areas, different jurisdictions. And so we do believe that access to justice doesn't necessarily mean things have to be free. You can promote access to justice with some paid aspects of our website or our tools. Our general philosophy is we try our best not to charge during an emergency, but we want to open up opportunities to leverage some paid expertise. So that difference between an emergency and expertise is sort of foundational to JusTech. But there are two sides of this coin, right? So the tool is free, and we've had to make the most out of the funds that we've received. So as Ritesh mentioned, keeping the cost low, it doesn't matter how many people use the tool, 1 or 1,000, the costs are the same. We've also, with some of the videos and some of the courses that we have, we've tried to keep the video production costs low and voiceover costs low as well. So really trying to leverage as much as we can to create those tools and create those videos. We've also devoted our own time to researching, writing, coding, designing. So much of what you see on our website is just the blood, sweat, and tears of myself and my co-founders. But we agree, our initial funding success, I think, signals a clear appetite for this kind of work. So we don't believe we're a one-off. If anything, our experience talking to industry leaders shows that there's a clear need for additional legal automation work to be done in other areas as well.
Yeah, no, I want to come back to some of the legal innovation and automation in a moment, but it does occur to me that you were doing this during a pandemic, and as my understanding, you were all operating virtually in different locations. How did you find getting a project of this sort up and running at a time when everybody may have been in different places and where all the engagement was taking place virtually?
We did do this virtually. It was actually a lot of fun. I was in Ottawa, Ritesh was in Toronto, Ryan was in New York, and somehow we made it work actually very well. I think it worked well for us because we have different expertise, but our goal and work ethic is the same. And so we would set up weekly meetings where we would figure out what we need to do for the week. Everyone would go off on their own, do what they had to, and then come back the next meeting with the work completed. And I think what was really good was that because we were so different in our expertise, we weren't stepping on each other's toes. We were able to work independently and then just come together and put it all together as a team. I think what we've also learned from the pandemic is that a lot of things can be done virtually and teams can operate from a further distance than ever before. Technology has facilitated this idea of a virtual office. Most of our work was actually done through Teams, but there's so many other tools that allow you to interact virtually, whether that be through virtual reality or video phone calls or other platforms that allow for collaboration. Essentially, the pandemic has shown us that there's really anything is possible if you just leverage what you have to your disposal.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We've all had to learn some of those kinds of lessons, I think, over the last while during the pandemic. Now, from a substantive perspective, this wouldn't be the Law Bytes podcast if we didn't get a chance to talk a bit about substance and privacy law. Now, it seems to me that in some ways you've engaged, or your tool has engaged or interacted with probably more security breach cases than certainly most lawyers have, perhaps even more than some of the privacy commissioners may have. What's your take on whether the current rules work? You've obviously found a mechanism to allow companies to comply, but do you think the current rules are achieving the objective? Are there, as we think about privacy reform, are there changes that we should be contemplating?
So I think from the rules perspective, do we have adequate legislation? Clearly, when we just talking to small businesses, so yeah, we have to remember big businesses, corporations, they got in-house counsel, they got access to funds, and they got access to lawyers and expertise, but small businesses don't, and the rules and the systems currently just don't make it easy. There's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of follow-up, and we've actually heard horror stories from small businesses, especially when they try to work through the system. So here's an example. If an organization is breached and they reach out for support to the different government agencies, the second the word breach is used and they put information on there around, we think we've been hacked, the second you use a word like that, what ends up happening is they get a response. We've actually seen these responses. They get a response back saying, this is now a law enforcement matter. This is no longer a privacy matter because the word hack was used. And you're told to contact your local law enforcement agencies. We've even seen this at an individual level as well with hacked accounts or breach accounts. So as an individual, as a small business, you're just trying to do one thing, and that is you want to make the necessary reports, but you want to get back up and running. You want your systems up and running. You're kind of already under this immense pressure and stress. The fact that we're all living through this global pandemic, and you've been a victim of a cyber crime. And does the process actually help you, or does it put fear in you and kind of re-victimize individuals? So we think that there is a lot of work that can be done to make reporting easier, to make notifications easier, to not remove the fear from the process. Now, this isn't a critique of necessarily of everything that has been done to date. We do think that there's a lot of resources made available. We all want to do it for the right reasons. But when you're a victim of a breach and you're going through those three requirements, being the report to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, the client notifications, and the record keeping requirements, as you're going through that stuff, the last thing you need is to receive to receive letters and to receive commentary that actually this is now a criminal matter. It just adds to the fear. It adds to that process. So our thing is, how do we actually become create a one-stop shop, somewhat of a small business hub, where we can become proactive, not reactive, put more resources and funding into it, but then also create legislation that supports small businesses, not actually adds additional stress and fear at a time when they're most vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay. And there's certainly laudable objectives, particularly as you suggest in the small business context. I'm sure it may strike some as they listen to this that, you three are months away from finishing up law school and entering into the profession. And here you've created a tool that in some ways says, listen, the profession we're going into is simply very expensive and maybe inaccessible to some. And so we see this kind of legal innovation taking place with automation, with the use of AI. What are some of your thoughts as you prepare to enter into the legal profession about these kinds of tools? I mean, your tool's a good example, but it's illustrative potentially, I think, of a far broader trend, and that is trying to identify certain kinds of legal services that typically have been expensive because, that's just, those are some of the fees that are associated with providing legal services, and saying, hey, we can automate some of this. And if we can do it in a way that makes it far more affordable, what do you think that says more broadly about the future of legal services and the increasing use of this kind of automation?
So I don't think we think that we're replacing anyone or replacing jobs. Maybe it's more appropriate to say that we're improving, or maybe we're assisting people. We like to maybe use more of that language, but at the ground level, it's to provide better access to the current systems and to information, right? So we're trying to place agency in the hands of people without legal experience or knowledge and give them confidence, right? But we also think that we're making the lives of legal professionals easier. So if a client knocks on your door and they say they have a data security breach and they have all this information available to them and it's already in their hands, that saves time and that saves effort that would be on the legal professional's shoulders to go through, right? So, and we're hoping that some listeners would agree with us on that point at the very least. And the other thing is that, more broadly speaking, the reality is that our legal system requires forms, right? It places authority on the written word and creating records. So we don't think that forms are necessarily going anywhere. And in that context, automation has a key role to play. It's going to be important. So it's powerful when done responsibly. We've designed our website, JusTech, with privacy and access to justice in mind. So for example, our privacy policy, if you go read it, it should be very easy to read. We hope we've done a good job with that. Same with our terms of service. It should be understandable, not just to legal professionals. We also don't collect personal information unnecessarily. We're not trying to create these troves of information for the people coming to our website. It's bare bones, and we want to make sure that people coming are protected. So it's all about this sort of responsible innovation and being very careful and mindful about how we move forward. Also, when we were in the hackathon, we had thought, well, can we do something with artificial intelligence, machine learning? And there are definitely amazing tools out there that are leveraging that kind of technology, but it's also doesn't always need to be the answer. What we've done with automation and with JusTech can be replicated with the right tech and legal knowledge and a little trial and error, and doesn't need a vast amount of coding expertise or knowledge of AI.
Okay, so we could see more of these kinds of services. Perhaps you guys will inspire others to enter into future legal hackathons and sort of take their own piece of the access to justice problem through technology. But why don't we wrap with this? What's next for your particular service? Do you see opportunities to expand some of the kinds of things that you're doing?
Definitely. We've built JusTech around what we call the wheel and spoke analogy. So as we continue to work on the tool, we hope to add more resources and partnerships that essentially address all concerns of small businesses that they may have while they're going through a privacy breach. Meaning, we want to create a network of cybersecurity specialists, lawyers, law enforcement agencies, and really anyone who could provide value to small businesses. So there's always opportunity for other people to jump in. Another conversation we've been having as a team is whether we would like to expand horizontally, as in providing our current services to more jurisdictions, or vertically, meaning offering more services within our current jurisdiction. We've also had interest from a few other parts of the world, and we really we really do see value in providing and promoting automation and accessibility everywhere. So as a team, what we've really been doing is taking an interest in these other marketplaces and understanding their needs, connecting and building relationships with people who live within those countries, and truly understanding what is required to create something that will address the pertinent issues in that region. So at this stage, we're exploring, but we do definitely see a very bright future for legal automation and for JusTech as well.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, obviously some exciting opportunities down the road, but I have to say, some really fantastic accomplishments to date. So congratulations to all three of you for the wins in the hackathons, for developing this in the midst of a global pandemic and having such a successful launch so far. And I know that I'm excited, and I'm sure many people are as well, to see what comes next. Thank you all for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's the Law Bytes podcast for this week. If you have comments, suggestions, or other feedback, write to lawbytes@pobox.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter @LawBytesPod or Michael Geist @mgeist. You can download the latest episodes from my website at michaelgeist.ca or subscribe via RSS at Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify. The Law Bytes podcast is produced by Gerardo Lebron Laboy. Music by the Laboy brothers, Gerardo and Jose Lebron Laboy. Credit information for the clips featured in this podcast can be found in the show notes for this episode at michaelgeist.ca. I'm Michael Geist. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.